For me, what I would say, this is not the good, bad and ugly. This is a good, sad and ugly. Gotabaya Rajapaksa was a non-starter because he came and then his tax policy, his fiscal policy and the monetary policy was completely against norms, and then he had the crash and we all know what happened there. Now the economy is at 100 billion. Correct. At 100 billion, that means from 72 billion or let's say 75 billion to 100 billion, that means the economy has roughly gone up by 25 billion.
Welcome to another edition of Insight. Sri Lanka President Andrakumara Dissanayaka, in his capacity as the finance minister, revealed the budget for next year. Some people say it's a miracle budget which can address everything in this country, whereas others say it's a IMF-oriented budget. To talk more about this, we have Riyad Riffai, the director at Advocata Institute, which is a think tank for economic policies. Welcome to the show, Insight, Riyad.
Thank you, Shihar. Thank you for having me.
In a nutshell, if you say about the budget, what would you say?
Thing is, Shihar, I mean, obviously looking at the budget, so normally I'll just go through the easiest way to explain it. Because normally when you look at anything that has come new, the normal saying or the quote is, the good, bad and the ugly. For me, what I would say, this is not the good, bad and ugly. This is a good, sad and ugly.
What is the saddest part?
The saddest part is, so the thing is, I'll start with the good because we'll go and then, people get the hang of it. So the good is basically, I think they completely have followed the IMF roadmap because, the fiscal targets are there. They had to keep a primary surplus. They have to keep the budget deficit in the range of 5. All that part they have done, and the taxes, how they have gone very aggressively, the tax policy is good because that is something where Sri Lanka was lacking. But the problem is, while going into taxes, if they think that you can tax your way into prosperity, that's not the way how things are. So for me, the sad part is like what you previously asked is the growth. Where is the growth angle coming from? Fiscal side is solid in this, right? But then again, for the economy to grow and even for the fiscal to grow, tax revenue to grow from 2026 and beyond, you need to have that particular growth, right? Because now currently the growth projections given by the World Bank and the IMF are basically just below 4. That is simply not good enough.
But Riyad, in the budget, the president says they are targeting a medium-term growth of 7%.
Okay, but the thing is, there are two sides of the story. The Sri Lankan economy has basically beaten IMF and World Bank projections in the last 2 years, which you know about. But looking at 7% is almost like doubling what is there now. So then you have to think, okay, what is there to be double? Is there anything specific that's going to happen? Because if you look at growth policy and during all previous governments, without the last 2 governments, now for example, that is President Gotabaya's government and the Yahapalne government, where there was no iconic project or iconic thing where they did, because during Wickremesinghe's one, there were just 2, he couldn't go in for anything iconic. The reason was the economy was soon after the economy kind of stabilized, it got destabilized again with the Easter bombings and what happened after that. But and Gotabaya Rajapaksa was a non-starter because he came and then his tax policy, his fiscal policy and the monetary policy was completely against norms, and then he had the crash and we all know what happened there. But if you go back, let's say 20-30 years ago, every government has an iconic project what they did. If you look at President Premadas's, there's something still people talk about, was the apparel factories, the garment industry, how it benefited, and that became a driver of growth.
But I think it was started when he was the Prime Minister.
Yeah, but the thing is...
it was his project.
It was his project.
Right.
So that was there. And then if you look at, and for example, even if you go back to Chandrika Bandarane Kumaratunga, even certain things that she did, for example, what she did for the telco industry with Mangala Samaraveera as the subject minister, where they liberalized the telco industry and the Sri Lankan telcos are now best in the world.
That has been one of the successful privatizations in the country.
and liberalization in the country.
And also, we should not forget about Mahaveli under J.R. Jayawardena.
Exactly. So everyone had their iconic project, right? And Premdas had that, and Chandika had something at J.R. Jayawardena's, and J.R. Jayawardena with the liberalization, how he opened things up. But the problem is you don't see anything iconic in this. Because the reason why I'm saying that is, now, one thing that President and this government have very particularly have spoken about is that they're going to go into AI, technology, where it's going to be a digital-based economy and all that. Digital-based economy is something that people have been talking for a long while, but nothing much happened. And this government is also saying about, they're going to digitize the whole system where, with technology, they're going to drive the economy. But if you look at the budget allocation for technology, like for example, the Science and Technology Ministry is 0.14% of GDP.
But digitalization, isn't it a separate ministry?
It's a separate ministry. But the thing is, there's no absolute roadmap on it. No? I mean, how is the digitalization going to come? Right? I mean, if you look at digitization, it's not just going and doing a small project here and a small project there. It has to be an overall strategy where we are going to get a lot of FDIs, right? And where we are going to get a lot of investments, and it's going to be an iconic project. Like let's say the government is planning to basically speak with someone and put a huge tech park. Or they are going to speak with a...
But this digitization is, Riyad, it's something else. I mean, as far as I know, what they are going to do is, basically, if you have a digital ID, and if you have that chip, and if they analyze that chip, they should be able to get your assets, and then your properties, your vehicles, your tax numbers, right? Isn't it that what they are aiming for?
No, so that is not going to be a driver of growth. No. That is basically you're going to tax. That's one thing is you have a digital identity. It will make things easier for you to do business. For example, you don't have to go to multiple places. Let's say you want to start a business. You don't have to go to multiple agencies, or you don't have to go to the Pradeshya Sabha or to the municipality, because as soon as you go, you put your biometric or something, you put it in, then that part gets automatically filled. So it makes it easier. But that's not going to be a driver of growth. No, that's what I'm saying. What is the iconic project? Because some of the ministers were saying before the budget also that, they are going to digitalize. So that was the impression that we got. We thought, okay, they are going to get into some huge tech park or something like that, where they are going to put a lot of money into government. But this is just part of e-government. E-government is something, e-government is something we are like almost 15-20 years behind the rest of the world, right? And we are at least about 10 years behind India, right? So with regards to that, nobody knows what this iconic project for growth is going to come.
I think, Riyad, this e-government is being discussed from Chandrika government onward, right? Nothing has happened. There is little progress, but nothing has happened significantly.
Correct.
Right? And then, if you talk about the tax side, how do you see, taxes? Do you see it's fair? Do you see whether they have targeted the correct people, correct segment in the society?
So the taxation policy is, it's a wider net which they have thrown. So the wider net means they are going after a particular set of, you can't say going after, they are basically put the net out. If you fall into that 150,000 threshold, or below that, then you don't pay. If you're above
they have not changed that. I think they have
exactly.
They have only reduced the VAT threshold, right?
Yeah, so the VAT threshold has been brought down from for businesses, which was 60 million, for SMEs, which was 60 million, which you had to register for VAT. From 60 million, they brought it down to 36 million. Now, again, that is a bit of a vertical question mark for me, because the current scenario, the ratio between direct and indirect taxes in Sri Lanka at present is 75 to 25, right? So that's a current ratio. President has said that he wants to bring it down to 60 to 40. But the thing is, I don't see how he's going to hit that target, right? Because the reason is most of the money, more than close to about 55% of the government's tax revenue actually comes from VAT, right? And they have brought the threshold down, which means they're still targeting more VAT money to come. But then again, he has contradicted himself by saying he wants to bring it down to 60 to 40. So that is a kind of a question mark to me. That is one part. The fiscal side, I think it's very straightforward. They didn't change. Fiscal means at least the income taxes thing. It's very straightforward. they haven't changed it. So there's nothing much concern there. We are used to it. On the wider taxation, I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to go with a wider net, right? So that is I think their policy. That's why they are telling everyone to, at least even if you don't pay taxes, register. And they have put certain curtails. Now, for example, if your TIN is not there, you can't buy a vehicle, you can't transfer a vehicle, you can't buy a house, you can't transfer a deed, right? So those those issues are there. Right, you're not issues. That's how they are basically, trying to get the people into the net. If you are getting below 150,000, don't pay, but just file your taxes saying this is what I get. If you are getting above, you pay your taxes. So that is very straightforward. The fiscal part this year, they hit 5.1 trillion. Right, that was their fiscal target, which they have hit. In 2026, they are looking at 5.3 trillion. Now, the problem what I'm having is, out of that 5.1 trillion, about 600 billion, which is a significant amount, actually came from vehicle imports. Now, we know there's a wider discussion going about vehicles. That's a complete discussion in future. I'm pretty sure you will have with someone, where there is an oversupply in the market, right? Because there was a pent-up demand. Everyone's thought, okay, the car sales guys thought, okay, 4 to 5 years, nothing came, because the last import, I think, was done in 2020, August or September or something like that. After that, it stopped. And they thought, okay, there's a huge pent-up demand. Let's bring the vehicles down. We can sell and make some good money. Nothing wrong with that. They are doing business. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think they kind of overshot on the estimate on what the pent-up demand was. The thing is, the demand can be there. You and I or anyone in any Sri Lankan would want to buy a new car, but there's something called affordability. Affordability has become an issue now, because the reason is now we are paying quite high taxes, right? Then what we used to before 2020, we are paying higher taxes now. And certain things, for example, the dollar has slid, which means the cost of the vehicle has gone up, right? Some taxations of the vehicles have gone up. So affordability is, and plus the lease percentage, which was given out, was 60% for passenger vehicles, which has further in this budget been brought down to 50. Saying the leasing companies or financing companies with debt, you can only finance 50% of the outstanding or the lease or the loan. So with all that, how can a normal guy who, let's say, a guy who wants to buy a car, let's say a senior executive or manager or something in a company, how can he afford to buy or afford to pay for the lease when he has to cough up 50% of the capital of the vehicle and then pay 50% on top of that? Because normally a vehicle, if you take a rough estimate, it's about 10 million. A decent vehicle is about 10 million. So if you're paying a lease even for 6 to 7 years, you'll have to commit at least over 100,000 as lease. And then plus you have to pay 5 million upfront. So, and these guys, they have housing loans, they have their household expenses, they have children, all that stuff. Because the cost of food, cost of living also has gone up, right? So
but Riyad, if you see on the road, you see a lot of new vehicles, right?
At what percentage here?
Despite
at what
that,
percentage of the population? The guys who have bought the vehicles down initially, when they open, those are the people who don't. Okay, I'll put it this way. I think this is the best way to explain this. Sri Lanka's economy before the crisis was roughly about 85 to 87 billion, correct? Right? And then we reeled to about 72 or something like that. Okay, 76 or 72 or somewhere there. We get down to mid or early 70s, somewhere there. We went down. Now the economy is at 100 billion, correct? At 100 billion, that means from 72 billion or let's say 75 billion to 100 billion, that means the economy has roughly gone up by 25 billion. It has basically gone 30% or something up, right? That 30% of the GDP that has come into the economy, or 30% of that wealth creation that has come into the economy, how many people have benefited from that? Right? Because you see that I'm pretty sure the Sri Lanka's Gini coefficient test, I think I'm pretty sure it has gone up. Which means,
so in other words, what you say is rich people are getting more richer, whereas poor people are getting more poorer. And the income gap, the income equality, or the gap between the rich and poor
has widened. Definitely has widened, because poverty has gone up to 22%. I think it was higher, but it has come down because the economy is like moving on. But still, poverty is at 22%. I mean,
it's very high.
It's very high. It's still very high, right? So the thing is, obviously, if poverty is at 22%, that means if the economy has grown, obviously those people haven't been the beneficiaries of that. Right? It's a wealthy class that has been. That's why initially when they opened the gates for car imports, you saw all the luxury vehicles, right, that came in. I mean, on WhatsApp and Facebook was at a, people were sharing so many photos of, vehicles that came to Colombo port, because these are privately imported high value vehicles like, Rolls Royce Cullinans, Range Rovers, Ferraris, things like that. Those vehicles, they don't come in a normal car carrier, they come in a secured box. And it comes to the Colombo port, not to Hambantota. So everyone saw that. That means these are people, irrespective of what the price is, they are going to buy it. Right?
Yeah, I mean, Sri Lankans are...
and Sri Lankans, we love our cars. No?
They are known for spending more than what they earn.
Absolutely.
Right? And they are ready to get the best despite borrowing or getting indebted.
No, that's the thing. So that's a mentality. I think that's a South Asian or maybe even Southeast Asian mentality where going in a luxury or going in a particular vehicle, it's a statement. Right? It's a statement to the public. Right? It's a statement to the public. I mean, if you look at most of the American billionaires, I mean, not all of them are like that, right? But there are guys who drive clapped out cars and all that, because the reason is they don't care. Because if Bill Gates comes in a Mercedes, so if he comes in a, not Mercedes, if he comes in a Rolls Royce, so if he comes in an Aqua, he's still Bill Gates.
Exactly.
Right? So there are issues like that also. And other thing is, it's in a country like Sri Lanka, a vehicle is considered an asset. Where in other countries, it's considered liability, because after 5 years, you get rid of it. Now in Japan, I'll tell you how the second-hand car market works. Since we are talking about cars, in Japan, every 3 years, if you buy a brand new vehicle in Japan, and for the first 3 years, there are no health certificates you need to do. Now, for example, in England, there's this famous one called MOT, which the Sri Lankan government is also have spoken about in this budget, that they want to bring a health certificate for vehicles. How they go about doing it is a complete question to me, because it's a huge process. Right? It's not like going to a...
I don't want to deviate, Riyad, because I know you are expert in vehicles.
No. Yeah, correct.
But let's move to the expenditure side.
Yeah.
How do you see the allocations for each and every ministry the projects?
So the thing is, we spoke about the good and the sad. Now we need to speak about the bad. Sorry, not the bad, the ugly. So the ugly is the expenditure part. Now, if you take the government's expenditure, the highest allocation is for Ministry of Finance and Planning. That is 14.3 billion, 14.3% of the GDP. Then the next is provincial councils, 13.9, and the third is 13.4 is public administration. Now, finance and planning, obviously we have the loan settlements and certain payments that we have to go out and all that. Debt management, everything is there, so that is understandable. Provincial councils also, they do a lot of. I think the president also said that he wants to fix the irrigation system. He wants to fix certain provincial roads and all that. So that allocation also you can justify. Now the third one is public administration. That's the third biggest allocation in the budget. So public administration is only one thing, no? It's salaries, right? And any other expense, a capital expense or even a recurrent expense, not a recurrent expense, but normally a capital expense, if you're doing, let's say you're building 100 schools, you're building 10 hospitals. Let's say suddenly the governments, unexpectedly, because of an international issue, maybe because of some local thing, maybe because of the weather, let's say their revenue comes down, the economy slows down and other problems come, and the revenue comes down. When the revenue comes down, certain expenses you can cut. 100 schools you can bring it down to you can cut down. Let's say, I'm just saying for argument's sake, you can say 20 schools will be stopped. And say, we are going to save that money because this year we don't have the money, let's look at it next year. Same thing with hospitals. Any capital expenditure, you can slow down.
They did it this year, right? Because the allocation was 1.315 trillion, whereas they revised it to 1.03 trillion. But as far as I know, a significant amount of that money has not been spent on public investment. Rather, it has been spent on earlier loans. This is what we hear.
No, that's what I'm saying. So the thing is, if something happens like that, because the debt obligation we have to pay, now the roadmap is set by the IMF, you have to pay. So if you get stuck somewhere, you can take that money and pay. But the problem is, if you make such a big allocation and you're going to expand government services, that is, the head count, then it becomes a big issue. Because the thing is, you can't stop paying salaries, no? That's a huge problem. I mean, if you recruit and if you increase salaries,
now
that is a no question.
Yeah, Riyad, when you take salaries, right? This is because I think we have a bloated public sector,
service,
right? In 2005, when Mahinda Rajapaksa became the president, we had only around 6,000 public servants, right?
Yeah.
And then when he left in 2015, we had almost 1.6 million. Right?
Not 6,000, 600,000.
Sorry, 600,000. 600,000 in 2015.
Correct.
So 2005 and in 2015 it was 1.6 million.
Yes.
Almost 1 million higher than
correct.
In 2005.
Yes.
And now you just can't ask the people to leave, or you can't sack the people and say there is no jobs.
Absolutely.
Right? You have to maintain them. You have to look after them.
No,
right? So that's the obligation of the government.
That's the obligation of the government. I agree.
Yeah. Now, my point is, do you see anything? I mean, this is why the IMF is, crying for reforms in the SOEs, state-owned enterprises.
Absolutely.
Do you see anything coming like that in this budget? SOE reforms.
So the SOE reforms are completely nothing is mentioned about that. Only thing is, for Sri Lankan Airlines, they said that they'll keep on keeping provisions for what do you call the expected losses or whatever you call it, right? Because Sri Lankan Airlines, there was a very small period where they kind of made an operating profit, and again they have dipped back into losses. So Sri Lankan Airlines, and there are a lot of state-owned enterprises which are beyond redemption, right? So currently, what's the plan? Because as a taxpayer personally, I don't want my money that I work hard for, which I pay as taxes to the government, going to keep some of these places alive just for the sake of doing it. Because then it's not fair, no? Because if that money is going to build a hospital, if that money is going to build a road, if that money is going to go into healthcare, right? If it's going to schools, if it's going to uplift society, yes. This is not uplifting society, no. These are state-owned enterprises with 5,000-6,000 employees, or maybe even more, right? X number of people working. Just to keep that going, it makes no sense. And especially after a time where a huge country like India let go of their airline, thinking, okay, we can't do this anymore. I don't see why we are holding on to this. But then again, there's an operational issue also, because the reason is Sri Lankan Airlines, nobody's going to touch it. This is something I've spoken in the past also, because there are two things which is impacting Sri Lankan Airlines. One problem is Sri Lankan Airlines business model is completely out, right? How they operate, I think some of these routes they are operating on doesn't make any sense. So I think how Sri Lankan Airlines, if someone is taking it over, the way I see it is they have to run like a regional airline where they cater. Because one advantage what Sri Lanka has as a country is, if you look at the South Asian the politics, right? India and Pakistan problem, India and China problem, then India and Bangladesh problem, Pakistan and Bangladesh problem.
So we have blessing in disguise.
We have blessing. We are the only country where everyone is kind of cool with us. So if you become a regional, and for example, if no Indian flight goes to Pakistan, no Pakistan flight comes to India, right? Like that, there are issues. Sri Lankan flights go to everywhere. No?
So let's see the big picture, Riyad. I mean, do you see any signs of or seriousness of government in reducing this the public sector losses, especially in those main three institutions, CPC, CEB, and Sri Lanka?
No. So the thing is here, without going into serious reforms in any of those places, one thing is the reform side. The second thing is you need to bring competition for them to do well. So the competition is also not there. Now, for example, I'll tell, Sri Lankan Airlines running at a loss. Catering is running at a profit. Ground services is running at a profit. Why? Catering is a monopoly. Ground handling is a monopoly. That's the reason. I mean, if there's another company catering, Sri Lankan catering they'll also go bankrupt. Ground handling also same story. So if you're selling Sri Lankan, you have to sell it as a package. You can't pick. Of course, some people are saying we are giving a huge, chunk of the economy to outside person. No, so it's better to give it to outside person, because if that outside person makes a loss, it doesn't come on to the citizens. Because, that is one part. CPC and the CEB reforms came during the last government, right? The unbundling came. But the problem is, again, they have rebungled the unbundling. So, I mean, if you don't break into the three critical components of the CEB and make them individually responsible for their own operation, where they can't pass on the losses or pass on the blame between each other, you're not going to get anywhere. CPC also is the same story, because the petroleum corporation it's a near monopoly, right? But manufacturing, they are a monopoly, because distribution, of course, still they are the market leader. They have they have 66%, correct? IOC has 1/3 and they have 2/3. So somewhat of CPC, petrol sheds and distribution, and even the look and feel of petrol sheds also have changed, because LIFC started upgrading their petrol sheds. Then they were forced to upgrade because nobody would have gone there.
You are talking about competition here.
So that's the thing. So the reforms have to come through competition. If you don't have competition, give a monopoly, how are you going to go forward?
But the other side of the coin in the petroleum sector, Riyadh, is now the price is set by the government, and all of these private, the private sector companies, like whether it's Sinopec, whether it's LIOC, they also stick to the government price. Why can't they go for a reduced price? So where is the competition coming?
So the competition is they're going on a price formula, right? They're going on the price formula now,
and that's decided by the government. CPC
government
decides.
Yeah, but then again, I don't know if you notice, some of the new petrol sheds that have come, Sinopec and all, they were selling at like 2 rupees, 3 rupees below market. They were selling, right? But the thing is, currently people are, because those petrol sheds are in good locations. If you look at that petrol shed, it looks nice, because most of the CPC sheds, they look clapped out. They're in pretty bad state, right? So obviously, I'm just asking you, Shihar, if you're going to pump fuel, you see a busted up petrol shed that is selling at how much? Let's say litre 3. I can't remember how much.
294.
Okay, 294. And there's a nice new shed by Sinopec, LIOC, or Shell. There's a nice new shed. Which one will you go to? You will go to the nice shed, no? Because you know why? Because that shed has new tanks, which means those tanks are not contaminated, right? They have new pumps, which means the pumping accuracy is more, right? You will go to that, right? So that's the reason. So when people are going and pumping, and when they are hitting their targets, why should they bring the price down? That is competition, right? So CPC has to upgrade and up their game, right? And not point fingers at other people. Right, I mean that's a basic reason.
No, my concern is, Riyadh, that has not happened actually. I mean, bringing in other players like LIOC and Sinopec, we don't see a significant price reduction because of the competition, because the government set the price and they follow it.
Yeah.
So
it's like this. No, it's a business case. No, share. All these sheds, they have a minimum quantity they have to pump to make it profitable as a business. The reason why they are not selling it under par, the reason is because this is par, they are not selling it under par is because they are getting that quantity. I mean, that's how business. Private sector doesn't work for the good of the people. No? I mean, they should, but what they pay is the main primary reason is profit. So in profit, if they are hitting their target, why should they give it at a discount? Because that means more people are going to those sheds than other sheds. Okay. That's my simple answer to that.
Okay. So we are coming towards the end, Riyadh. In your view, what's the downside risk of this budget?
So the downside risk here is, for me, I think the greatest thing, the reason I'm going to talk about now for the next 5 minutes or so is something is very important to Sri Lanka, which hasn't happened, thankfully. It's actually something to do with God. Sri Lanka has been, I know you're going to laugh at that. I see this cheeky smile which I remember from school days. Right? So the reason why I'm saying about God is, right, it's a hilarious thing, is because actually Sri Lanka in the last 6 years or 5 to 6 years, we have been very fortunate with rain. Right? Rain is a massive factor in Sri Lanka for two reasons. Currently, Sri Lanka's biggest power generation at the moment is hydro. Because
source of power
generation is hydro. And hydro is the cheapest source of power generation in the country, because technically it's paid off. It's just the recurrent expenditure of keeping the crew, it's just the recurrent expenditure of salaries and all that at the hydro stations. That's it. Right? That is one. And the little bit of wear and tear that comes with it. Second is solar. Out of the solar, I think most of it must be roof solar, then commercial solar, and then you get the fossil fuels, right? Fossil fuels, and what you call what's the other one? Fossil fuels, and then things like wind and all that, which are like a tiny solar and all that, which is like a tiny. Solar is big. Roof solar is huge. I think roof solar is number 2 now almost. And then you get the what you call the fossil fuels, and you have things like wind power and all that. So hydro is generating so much is because of the rain. And hydro has a second effect which nobody thinks about. If hydro is working very well, that means Sri Lankan farmers are getting their water on time, right? There's no shortage. So because the what you call the CEB is not holding back, right? They're letting it out. So that means production of let's say vegetables and mainly paddy, right? The crop is good. It's going to be a good Yala and Maha, right? So that is going to be a huge factor, because if it doesn't rain, one thing, agriculture is going to get hit obviously. Second is we'll have to go with thermal, right? We'll have to go with
which means you have to import
more fossil fuels, which means again what do you call import bill is going to be under pressure. So that is going to be a huge factor on the downside. The second factor is what's currently happening in the world. Now things at the moment have calmed down, but you never know when things are going to blow up again, especially with what's happening in the Middle East, right? And Trump, because President Trump is the most unpredictable thing. The only thing to describe President Trump is like the only thing predictable about him is being unpredictable, right? So we don't know what he's going to do next, right? And the man has another 3 years to go, right? So looking at that, if there's another slowdown in the world, it's going to have an impact on our exports, especially the apparels, right? And apparel is the biggest single item when it comes to exports, right? And if things slow down pretty bad, and especially say again the Middle East something happens in the Middle East, that means it's going to impact on our labor market also, right? Because then things will slow down there. A lot of the people will feel unsafe to stay there. They'll come back, which means it's going to have an impact on our remittance. So looking at that unpredictability and vehicle taxation on the fiscal side, that is a big concern to me, right? Because this weather pattern, a lot of people have forgotten about it.
Since you have spoken about the energy, I mean, one of the main concerns by the investors raised is about the cost of energy in Sri Lanka. And basically that has increased the cost of their production and manufacturing because of the energy. Do you see any proposal in this budget to reduce that?
I mean, not really. I mean, I don't know. I went through the budget. I didn't see anything like that. The only thing that what you see is that normally commercial energy is subsidized by civilian energy, right? So there is something like that. But when it comes to energy and bringing the cost down, I don't see anything. Only thing is the companies are taking particular initiatives. Like for example, there is something that we can talk about, but then again, that's also relatively expensive. You can't say exactly that's cheap. Where they're trying to go big into solar energy and then go into battery banks. Because the president did mention that he wants already, I think they called tender for 100 megawatt battery bank plant where the energy is stored and used in the night during the daytime, because Sri Lanka's nighttime demand is quite high, and he said that they are going to go for a second 100 megawatt battery bank. And plus the individual companies also, they might go with roof solar, or they might create their own solar plants and all that, and they might put battery plants in their vicinities and use it. So those are things that the individual companies would do. But currently, per se, to bring down the cost of electricity, the only thing the government can do on an immediate state, right, is actually to go for a coal power plant, which will also take about 2 to 3 years to build.
There is a lot of concern about the environment. Anyway, let me ask the last question, Riyad. How would you describe this budget in one word?
One word. I would say hopeful.
Not cautiously optimistic.
That's 3 words. That's 2 words. But if you give me more than 1 word, then I'll describe it in another way.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Riyad. Thank you very much for your insight on the budget for next year in the Insight. Thank you for watching us. We'll meet in the next Insight program. Goodbye.